And warmer from Evo, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and we've got an absolutely excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Herbert Seward for this wonderful SWAC Conference Preview Edition, as he does such a great job covering all things HBCU hoops as he's over at HBCU Digital Network along with Fansided. He has pretty much 17 jobs and does them all so well, so we're going to be chatting with him about all 12 of these teams, looking at the nooks and crannies, the coaching changes, the transfers, and so much more with them. Here in segment number 1, we're going to be taking a look at betting trends and styles of play that we've got in the SWAC, and then in the final segment, going to get you guys my projector or finish for this fine conference. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and since I'm doing a conference preview today, that means that the past 48 hours of college basketball news and notes, so anything that I didn't polish up on the podcast today here on Monday, since we always have to give standalone treatment to these conference previews, I'll be doing that on the podcast tomorrow. And let's get down to business and let's take a look at a SWAC where it really is a defense wins championships, in my opinion, conference, because this conference has some rough offenses, to say the least, headlined by our good friends in Mississippi Valley State. They were 362nd in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, very much less than savory effort, but it is not just them. You had Florida A&M be 352nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. Alabama State was 349th in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. Prairie View was 334th. Alabama A&M, they were 333rd, and you just go down the list of teams that have a tough time being able to put the ball in the basket, and it makes you wonder, how are these teams able to get wins and get the job done? It is on the defensive side of things, and if you're able to play defense in this conference, you've got yourself a shot, especially if you're able to play defense at home, because what you're going to notice with the SWAC is that the records overall for this conference and the overall metrics, they are very much warped. Like, you're going to be finding these teams being outside like the top 250 in so many different categories, what have you. That's because their entire non-conference is them going on the road, so that way they're able to get checks to be able to pay for the women's rowing team, to be able to pay for the men's ping pong team, what have you, so that way they're able to have all of their athletics. Like, these kids really make sacrifices. They have a whole bunch of travel. They're going from like one end of the country to the next within 48 hours to be able to pick up these bye games, and once in a while they win one of them, but I mean, that's the way that it works in the SWAC. But when it comes to the SWAC, you've had Grambling be able to be towards the top of the conference each of the last 2 years, and the reason why is their defense. Overall 151st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they were in the top 30 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis when they were at home. You saw Alabama A&M really be able to rise up towards the back half of the season last year. They were around 183rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, with your top defense in this conference being Alabama State. They were 47th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And then the teams that were not able to play defense, well, that was not good. Mississippi Valley State, 358th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That was by far your worst mark, but Arkansas Pine Bluff, they were 350th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Alcorn State clocked in at 343rd in the country with this regard, and that's why you saw things other than for Alcorn State. Alcorn State was able to overcome this. They were still able to have a nice year last year, but you're going to notice these teams, they don't play a lot of defense. They're going to be the teams that are going to be up against it. And what else you're going to notice in this conference as well is that when it comes to the shot selection itself, these teams really don't take a lot of threes. Arkansas Pine Bluff was an exception. Arkansas Pine Bluff was actually a top 20 team in terms of their three-point shooting percentage, in terms of percentage of shots that came from three-point range, 49.4%. That was number 6 in all of college basketball. But you look at the other teams in this conference, Prairie View, they were in the bottom 10 in terms of percentage of their shots that came from three-point range, and Alabama A&M and Alcorn State joined them in the bottom 15 with that respect. Grambling, they were 342nd in terms of their percentage of shots that came from three-point range. They were very much looking to drive it in as well. Florida A&M They were 333rd in terms of percentage of shots that came from three-point range. So you've got a lot of teams in this conference that they're looking to go down low. Quite a few of these teams, like a Prairie View, they're looking to be able to generate more turnovers rather than looking to be able to pop it from three-point range. And I do think that that's always leading to some interest with regards to these totals as well, because in the SWAC, you're not going to be getting a lot of opportunities for three-point shots. As a result, you typically find a few more unders in this conference, and last season that was very much on full display. Arkansas Pine Bluff, 16 overs, 10 unders, and a push. Elkhorn State, 17 overs, 14 unders. These were the only two teams within the conference that played at least 50% of their games to the over. You had Southern be a giant under team. They were great at being able to generate turnovers, 20 unders to 9 overs. Alabama State, 18 unders, 11 overs. Florida A&M, 16 unders, 11 overs. Mississippi Valley State, 18 unders, 13 overs. Texas Southern, they went 17 unders, 15 overs. And then the rest of the teams, they were either at 50-50 or they were one game below 500 with regards to the under. And when it came to conference play, that's where you really saw a lot of these unders be able to take hold, as nobody in the conference had more than 50% of their conference games go over the total. Bethune-Cookman, Mississippi Valley State, Prairie View, all either 9-9 or 10-10 to the over. Meanwhile, Southern, how about 15 unders of 4 overs in conference play? A good hearty 79%. Alabama A&M, 14 unders to 6 overs. Alabama State, 12 unders, 7 overs. Florida A&M, 11 unders, 7 overs. And then at Elkhorn State, Arkansas Pine Bluff, and Jackson State all have, at the very minimum, 10 unders to 8 overs. In the case of Elkhorn State and Jackson State, 11 unders to 8 overs. So very much a underwhelming conference, to say the least. And it's always interesting with the SWAC, because it feels like it's a very hit or miss conference in terms of the against the spread trends, and it's not quite a few of the teams in this conference be hovering right around about 500 against the spread, as Alabama State, Southern, Texas Southern, they were all either a game above or a game below 500 against the spread. Your most profitable team was Alabama A&M, 20-15 against the spread. A couple other profitable teams were Bethune-Cookman at 17-15, Grambling went 18-15 against the spread, and Elkhorn State 17-14 against the spread. Unfortunately, for this conference, the teams that weren't able to play a lot of defense, these were the teams that got lambasted. Florida A&M, 12-15 against the spread. Arkansas Pine Bluff, 9-18 against the spread. And Prairie View, a hearty 9-20 against the spread overall. So that was a little bit less than tremendous. And I still remember a few years ago, there was a big giant triumph in non-conference play for a lot of these SWAC teams. This past year was a little bit less than tremendous. Arkansas Pine Bluff, 2-7 against the spread in non-conference play. Southern, 3-7 against the spread. Mississippi Valley State, 4-9 against the spread. Elkhorn State, Grambling, 4-8 against the spread. You're going to find this a lot with the transfer portal just poaching so many of these teams, so they are not able to put their best foot forward until later on in the season. Though you did have Jackson State go 7-5-1 against the spread in non-conference play. Prairie View was 6-5 against the spread non-conference play, and then in conference play, boy oh boy, that was one of the worst marks in all of college basketball for Prairie View. They went 3-15 against the spread in conference play, a nice cool 16.7%, and that allowed a lot of other teams to be highly profitable. Alabama A&M, 13-7 against the spread in conference play, 14-7 for Grambling. Elkhorn State, 13-6 against the spread in conference play, and then you had Texas Southern, Mississippi Valley State, Bethune-Cookman, all up between 55 and 58% of their games in conference play. And as you can tell, with a lot of these non-conference games being on the road, that meant that these teams on the road were a little bit more rough. You saw Florida A&M go just 6-11 against the spread on the road. For Prairie View, they were 7-12 against the spread on the road. They were actually terrible at home. Southern was 7-11 against the spread on the road. Arkansas Pine Bluff was 7-10 against the spread on the road. While your main teams that were able to succeed on the road, Elkhorn State went 12-9 against the spread, and Alabama State, Grambling both go 9-7 against the spread on the road, and then you had a 10-9-1 mark for Jackson State as well. Meanwhile, your best home court advantage in the conference, you've got a pretty solid conference in terms of travel. It's not over the top. It's not like super condensed, but at the same time, it's nothing extreme. You've got teams out there in Arkansas, Texas, certainly the Alabama schools are out there as well, but when it came to the best home court advantage that belonged to Alabama A&M, 9-3 against the spread. Bethune-Cookman out there in the great state of Florida, 8-3 against the spread at home. Southern went 7-3 against the spread at home. Florida A&M 6-4 against the spread at home. While Prairie View went a nice cool 1-8 against the spread at home, and then Arkansas Pine Bluff 2-8 against the spread at home. Alabama State 2-7 against the spread at home, and then a lot of equals from there. So very interesting conference, one where you're going to see not so many threes taken, but what you are going to see is a lot of new coaches. You're going to see a lot of new faces and a lot of excitement in the conference. As joining me next is Herbert Seward. He does such an amazing job covering HBCU basketball on all fronts, and we're going to be looking at all 12 of these teams, the coaching moves, the rosters, and so much more with them right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beats and Family Podcast, the SWAC Conference Preview Edition. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beats and Family Podcast. This is the SWAC Conference Preview Edition, and this man does a great job looking at HBCU basketball than pretty much anyone else out there. Herbert Seward, who has about 15 different jobs, and he does so all so well. He is an HBCU enthusiast over at HBCU Hoops Weekly. He does great work over at Fansided as a contributor over there, the HBCU Digital Network, and so much more. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at HHL Seward, his last name, Seward, and then the number 3 altogether. And Herbert, great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Thank you for having me again, man. This is becoming a recurring theme, and I'm glad that it is, man. This is good stuff.
Oh, I'm glad to have you aboard as well. You've got such a passion for it, and we always love to be able to take a look at these teams because whether you're looking at the ACC, the Big Ten, or if you're looking at the SWAC, you're able to make a lot of money on these teams, and all these teams, they fight hard out there on the court for us. And how about if we take a look at a team that really was able to make a lot of noise over the last week or so, very unexpectedly, in Bethune-Cookman. As Bethune-Cookman, they announced a big, giant transfer portal haul about a week or so ago. They're going to be bringing in Brayon Freeman, who spent some time over at Rhode Island. They bring in Gianni Hunt, Jesus Calalero, Trey Thomas, and so much more. They do lose quite a bit from last season, but what are your takeaways and thoughts right now on a Bethune-Cookman team that, as we know, coached by a man that knows a lot about basketball himself, and Reggie Theus?
I've taken a look at that portal class that he's brought in. And one thing about Bethune-Cookman that Coach Theus has really kind of made that program known for since he's been there is scoring backcourts. The scoring proficiency of the backcourts he's had there, last year Zion Freeman, headed a really prolific backcourt that was really, effective at scoring the rock at all 3 levels. And this class looks like the same thing. The only difference here is some among that class, man, you got some people that can really kind of do the job, on the block as well. In particular, I'm looking at Daniel Ruzan, 6'9", 240, power forward. He's going to give them a presence that they really haven't had a lot of in the past couple of seasons. You always have to worry about how those pieces fit when you really hit the portal like you do. You get a lot of new pieces from the portal. But the thing about the SWAC is, man, I'm looking at, some of the classes that have come in, some of the people that are coming in, and, this is awesome for the conference. And Bethune-Cookman, I think they're going to be amongst the squads that benefit the most from it.
Oh, no doubt about it. I absolutely love the haul that they were able to get in. Alcorn State a few days ago, just before this podcast, they got a really nice pickup as well. Marcus Tankersley, who was averaging about 16.5 points per game over at Detroit 8 seasons ago. This for an Alcorn State team has been right at the top of the SWAC under the last 3 seasons. Landon Busey has done a great job with this program, but has to rebuild with so many of those pieces gone from last year. Julian Lewell, who comes over from Arkansas State, he's going to be a 6'6", 6'7" combo player that tries to help them out. A team that, just looking at it, not necessarily a ton of size, but a lot of backcourt proficiency. How do you take a look at this Alcorn State team? One that has just always looked a little bit different year in and year out, but they've always found their way towards the top of the SWAC under Busey.
Yeah, I think the big thing with Alcorn, whenever you talk about what, Coach Busey has done with that program, is that they've had a system where, they've been able to be really interchangeable at spots 1 through 5. That has a lot to do with the lack of size that they've had on the roster. He's done a lot in terms of putting a lot of ball handlers on the court, a lot of people that can make really good decisions with the ball. And that has really translated into a defensive philosophy in conference that has been really, really effective for them. Like I said, I'm looking at the classes coming in with them. Hopefully they're going to get a little bit more scoring punch than they got last year from some of the people that are coming in. I think the big thing is how he's going to mitigate what he lost. because, a lot of what he lost on that roster, leadership wise, was really, really good. And it's going to be really interesting to see how exactly these newcomers are going to be plugged in and how they're going to fit into that system and acclimate to it.
Yep, I think that is the big question. As Herbert Seward, who does great work taking a look at HBCU hoops, he's joining me right here on Cusco Hoops for the SWAC Conference Preview Edition. And then when it comes to the SWAC, we have found Southern to be a team that has been so rock solid in the backcourt. Last year was lacking a little bit of something down low, but Brentley Noel at 6'10" think that he should be able to give them a little bit of punch. And while they do lose a few of their top scorers, Terrion Joseph, Brandon Davis being out, I always say the same incorrectly, but Tijani Diobasi coming back after he was able to dole out north of 5 assists per contest. That's big, along with Derek Tazino. How do you take a look at a Southern bunch that they really have done a nice job generating turnovers, but obviously had a little bit of a tough time down low and feels like they brought in a little bit more size to address that?
The name that immediately stands out to me is Diamasi, the Frenchman. Anybody that watched that guy play last year, he never got sped up. He was just smooth in terms of making his decisions on the court. Whenever they had him run point late in the season during conference play, Southern was a lot more efficient. And if he can, add a little bit more scoring to this game, he's got the potential to be an all-SWAC performer. I think a lot of what we're going to see in Southern is from the new men's basketball coach that's there, Kevin Johnson. They like to get out and run. From what he's brought in, they're long, athletic. There's going to be a lot of transition ball coming from them. Actually really excited to see the squad because I think, they have the potential to finish in the upper echelon of the conference. They're long, again, they're really athletic, and they've got length at all 5 positions. So I think that's something that if they can get the scoring punch that they need to get, from the 2 and the 3 spots, I think you're looking at a potential run to the SWAC championship with these guys.
Yeah, what Southern has been able to do, they've been able to do a nice job of being able to speed teams up, as you were mentioning, while not being sped up themselves, generating turnovers and having a bit more down low. I think it's going to be big for them, as we have a interesting bunch as well in Alabama State, where you know this as well as I do. A lot of these teams, they get ravaged by the transfer portal out in the SWAC, but Alabama State has a lot of their pieces returning from the season ago, bringing back C.J. Hines along TJ Madlock, who is the son of the coach Tony Madlock. So that helps in not getting poached in the transfer portal. Those 2 guys are going to be back. Obong Okan, he's a 7'1" big man. He's able to do a nice job down low. He's going to be back as well. Amar Knox is someone that I like in terms of his versatility. And when I take a look at Alabama State, they really possess something that not a lot of teams in the SWAC do, and that's chemistry and a lot of returning talent.
Yes. I mean, there's another name that wasn't mentioned there that he was injured all last year. That's Georgetown transfer, Deontay Bass. Him getting a chance to play this year along with that rotation is going to give Coach Matlock's squad a lot more athleticism at that 2 or 3 guard spot. TJ Matlock, again, I think he's a dog. I think that dude's going to be all SWAC this year. CJ Hines started out really, really good last year. Hit a little bit of a wall in the middle of conference season as people got adjusted to him. But, his pedigree speaks for himself. Prior to coming there, NAIA All-American at Faulkner, used to putting the ball in the basket. I think he's really going to grow into that role running point guard for that squad this year. The big thing that I really look at when I look at this squad is that they're deep. They've got a lot of depth. We're not going to see the complete product until, we get closer to the season starting. But the roster is deep. And again, they've got a rim protector in Ubong Okong, although I think he may need some assistance in terms of scoring on the block. That's the only thing that I anticipate, being a potential issue for this squad. Defensively, they're as good as anybody in the conference. And I think that's going to translate to this year. And I think that's something that's going to keep them in the mix for a SWAC championship.
Yep, with Alabama State, probably going to need to pick up that field goal shooting percentage a little bit. But to your point, very solid in terms of their defense. And this team is very rock solid with their defense as well. And they really picked it up in SWAC play to be able to get themselves to the NCAA tournament. And that'd be Grambling State. They bring back a few key pieces from a season ago. Contavious Dozier does a nice job in the backcourt. Nice bucket getter for this team. And then Antoine Burnett at 6'5" does a little bit of everything, grabs some rebounds, is able to space out the floor on the offensive side of things. And very fascinating to see what they're going to be able to get out of James Graham this season, a guy that comes over after he spent some time with Missouri State and Buffalo. So do want to get your thoughts on a team in Grambling State where I feel like when we talk about the best coaches in the SWAC, Dante Jackson needs to get a little bit more respect because he has done a great job with his program the last 2 years.
Yeah, Dante Jackson's been the best coach in the SWAC, the last 3 years running flat out. James Graham, this is an interesting name. Me being a DC Metro native and doing some work for the University of Maryland, I remember the University of Maryland doing their initial recruitment of James Graham. He was initially committed to the University of Maryland. I haven't seen a lot of his game since those days, but what I remember of his game is that he's extremely versatile. Saw some stuff from his Missouri days. He's got the potential to really flourish in this conference if he's used the right way. At the 2, as a big guard. At the 3, as a scoring small forward. He can shoot the 3. He can score at all 3 levels when you give him the opportunity. I think the big question with him is how he acclimates to SWAC play. I think finally finding the landing spot for him that he's going to get a chance to really flourish is going to be key. This is a good spot. Returning lineup that's coming back with the guard, rotation solidified. He's going to be able to find a niche for the squad and fit in. Gramblin's going to be a tough out. I think Grambling, like I said, from top to bottom, maybe the most complete roster in the conference. And, when March gets here, guard play is paramount, and they've got one of the best backcourts in the conference. It's going to be hard for anybody to unseat these guys. And I'm really excited to see how the season plays out for them.
I am as well. I think that it's going to be a fun one for them. And with Grambling, you know that they're going to bring their lunch pail on defense, as they always provide on that front. And when it comes to this Prairie View A&M team, you know that they're going to bring their lunch pail in terms of being able to provide on the defensive side of things. Byron Smith always has this team as one of the best at being able to generate turnovers in all of college basketball. I'm very intrigued by Braylon Bush coming in. He's a little bit of a shifty guy. He was listed at like 5'6", 5'7", but last year over at Northwestern State, nice double-figure score, guy that's able to dole out the ball, not necessarily going to be like a sniper from three-point range or anything like that, but does a great job, be able to dole it out. They bring in guys like Chris Felix Jr. is back from a season ago. Tanaj Petaway is someone who had some success over at Stony Brook as well. Lots of moving parts from a season ago, but I like a lot of these pieces, including a guy in Jordan Tillman who's had a lot of success at a few different schools.
Yeah, I think when I look at this Prairie View A&M squad, one, the winning tradition that's there at this program hasn't really gone away anywhere. I know there have been a couple of lean years here and there where they've not finished where they expected to finish in the conference. But I look at this roster and I still see a lot of depth and a lot of athleticism. You caught a couple of games from them last year. On any given night, those guys could have put it all together and really made a run. I think they're going to need to get more production from their shooting guard position. Nick Gazelis, he came in with a lot of fanfare from out west as a scorer, as somebody that can stretch the floor and shoot the 3 ball. They're going to be looking for a lot more from him and from that, shooting guard rotation. I'm really excited to see Braylon Bush. I got a chance to see a little bit of his play, and, the guy is shifty. He's going to be hard to stay in front of. And I'm really excited to see how he's going to fit into the offensive fortunes for the squad. This is going to be a really interesting team to watch. I think, again, this is a deep roster from top to bottom, and they've got the potential to really do some damage once conference play starts.
Yep, and it's always so interesting with their style. They're going to lack a little bit on the glass, but you know that they're going to be able to force those turnovers and really be able to put a lot of pressure on teams when they might not expect it. As joining me on the Coast to Coast Soups, Herbert Seward. He does great work over at HBCU Weekly, does a great job just covering the entire game of college basketball from the HBCU front. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Soups. And how about if we dive in on this bunch, because they were a whole heck of a lot of fun to watch. It didn't necessarily translate into a bunch of wins, but watching Arkansas Pine Bluff last year just bomb it from three-point range was tremendous. But now they do lose those guys from a season ago. Joe French, Rashad Williams, Kylan Melton, all those guys that were able to put up 15-plus points per contest, they are now gone, and now they're going to be looking to some new guys. They bring in Cleveland Vuga, who was over at Monmouth, a guy that is 6'9", provides a little bit of size. They're going to be looking to Jair McLeod, along with a guy in Quentin Bolton Jr., who I think is going to be interesting. Bolton, he was over in the Big South a season ago. So how do you take a look at a Pine Bluff team that they're really looking to pick up the pieces from a season ago, but it felt like when they approached a transfer portal, they were trying to be able to add a little bit more size, as now they've got like 4 or 5 different guys that stand at least 6'8".
Yeah, I think this team, out of anybody in the conference, is going to see the biggest change in style of play. I can understand full-heartedly exactly why this staff decided to go the way that they did last year with the weapons that they had on the perimeter. Anybody that's seen those guys play last year, Joe French, that guard rotation, they were a threat every time they stepped across half court. That was the MO. This year, this is going to be a little bit more traditional style of play out of this program. Now, obviously, they're going to be hard-pressed to replace all of that production that they lost on the perimeter. And that's going to be the thing that I'm going to be looking at. If they can get some sort of semblance of production from the 1 through 3 spots, I think who they brought in terms of shoring up the post is going to make a big difference. I think they're going to be a better defensive team, given who they've brought in terms of allowing rebounding, second chance points, just, really defending effectively on the post. I think it's going to be a real interesting thing to see how this work in progress presents itself when the season starts. The ceiling is there where they can really, potentially contend, but it's going to be hard to say until we actually see what the roster looks like as a final product.
Yep, absolutely. And then when it comes to this bunch, I think that it's very fair to say that there's a lot of question marks moving forward with them. As Mississippi Valley State, they're looking to be able to build something under George Ivory. It just hasn't necessarily happened for them. Now, I liked what I saw out of Donovan Sanders towards the back half of the season. He's going to be back. They've got Jair Horton, a guy that is 6'6". He's got a little bit of versatility, and if they're going to be able to build something down low, I think that Daniel Oma is going to be the guy that needs to step up down low, as he's got some nice 6'9" size. But how do you evaluate a Mississippi Valley State team that they've really just been, for lack of a better term, stuck at the bottom the last few years?
Yeah, I think the evaluation, standard for Valley's program right now is game by game, step by step. Quite frank, it's kind of hard not to do that given the types of seasons that they've had where, it's just been rough. It's been rough in terms of standings, where they finish at. Not to say that Valley hasn't been really competitive in conference, because I think they have been. They've just been missing a couple of components, to really string wins together and to kind of make themselves felt in conference. Now, how that translates, they have to be a lot better defensively. That's where it starts at. Early in the season, they were doing a really good job defensively. Once conference play started, it kind of started going downhill. That starts with stopping the guards, stopping, ball penetration into the lanes, and just really being efficient defensively on that end of the floor. I'm interested in seeing who's going to step up, because I think, there's some potential for some really good scoring, for some really good offensive scores on this squad. It's just going to be hard to see them out of the bottom half of the SWAC this year. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. For Mississippi Valley State, it's all about just some baby steps, be able to pick up a few wins, try to build some momentum for future years. And George Ivory, if there's someone that's able to do it, it is him. He's a hardworking coach, but it's just a very much an uphill battle, I think, is the best way of putting it. And Florida A&M, they've been a little bit up and down recently as well, but we did see some explosiveness from them on offense towards back half of the season. But Jalen Spears now being out, that hurts them. But I love the fact that they bring in Jordan Chapman. Jordan Chapman, someone that I really liked when he was over at Southern Indiana a few seasons, someone that I really liked last season when he was able to put up some really nice production. I know that on top of that, you've got someone like a Roderick Coffey III, who I expect some big things from as well. And Jermaine Charles is someone that at 6'11". He's got some size that should be able to help out this team down low. And I think that that's very much what was lacking for Florida A&M, because I feel like they're putting it together in the backcourt, but now being able to fortify things down low, I think is going to be to their benefit.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is the coaching change. Patrick Crary Jr. came from the NAIA ranks at St. Thomas, practically built that program from scratch and turned them into a perennial contender, for NAIA postseason and championship play, on that level. Dude is a real program builder. And I think the fact that Florida A&M was able to land him in spite of what, was kind of going on, the crazy stuff administratively was going on with FAMU in the offseason is crazy. And the fact that he's been able to put together this roster, with maybe a quarter of a recruiting cycle to do has been amazing. Just look at the roster, he's drawn from all over the place. He's drawn from NAIA ranks. He's drawn from Division II. I noticed he landed Shakir O'Neal, of that fame. The name sounds familiar. You're right. It's that family. He's done an exceptional job of putting together a roster given the challenges that he's kind of had, already at that program. And the fact of the matter is his style of play, if you ever watch St. Thomas's squads play, those guys are really, really tuned in defensively. They execute extremely well. They really don't make mistakes on either end of the court. And I'm eager to see exactly how much of that translates to SWAC play. There's some pieces here. And, I think obviously it's going to be, we won't have a real answer until we see these guys take the court for the first time. But I'm really excited to see what this staff has done in terms of putting this roster together in such a short period of time, especially given some of the challenges that the program's had over the years. If I'm a Florida A&M fan, I'm excited for the future, man. I really am.
Yep, I am as well. And if you're a fan of Texas Southern, you have to be excited about this roster as well. I love the fact that they bring in Jalen Jackson Posey, because the one thing I've noticed with Texas Southern, always good on the glass, always good defensively, sometimes lacks from three-point range. Jackson Posey is a guy that shot 40% from three at pretty much all stops, including Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin a few years ago. They've got Alex Anderson, someone who's 6'6", has some nice size. Kenny Hunter, he's able to do a tremendous job down low. I believe began his career over at Louisiana Tech. Kobe Granger is back after he was able to provide some versatility. 6'10" Grayson Carter as well. I look at Texas Southern and I see a team that I think is going to be able to do a tremendous job down low, and bringing in Jackson Posey, I feel like really puts it together on the offensive side of things as well.
I'm excited to see this Texas Southern squad, simply because I think they've got a good mix of returners coming back. And some of the talent that they brought in terms of SWAC standards is top-notch talent. I concur with you on Jalen Jackson Posey. He's going to give them a dynamic from behind the arc that they haven't had in a long time. I think the big thing here, I know PJ Henry and Jonathan Cisse really were a terror for SWAC folks to deal with. I'm not sure if those guys are back or not. If they are, that's one of the best backcourts in the conference, point blank. PJ Henry seems like he's been there forever. And Jonathan Cisse was just a weapon for those guys during the conference play and going into the conference tournament. He almost single-handedly carried Texas Southern, to an NCAA tournament berth. I think it's really going to be cool to see what they roll out on court this winter. I think people will understand that. Watch Texas Southern basketball. You can't never count these guys out. You can never count out, they might have a crazy start to a season. Next thing you know, they're in contention for, NCAA tournament bid. It seems to almost happen every year. If I'm a betting man, I am definitely not counting these guys out.
No question about it. I really like that Texas Southern team. As what I also like as well is that we've got Deshaun Ruffin, who is going to be back at Jackson State. I was so looking forward to him last season. Unfortunately, he takes that season-ending injury. A former top 75 recruit, a former McDonald's All-American. And hey, when he was a freshman over at Ole Miss, he was putting up double figures. So clean bill of health for him is big. They also bring in Marcus Watson Jr. Watson Jr. is someone that is a relatively well-traveled man, so we'll see what he's able to do there. They've got Shannon Grant at 6'10" to be able to add some size. I do think that the depth is a little bit of a question mark with Mo Williams' bunch, but I take a look at this Jackson State team, and they've got some top-flight talent, including Kavion Hunt back as well.
Yeah, Deshaun Ruffin may be the single most important returnee of anybody anywhere in the conference. It's not every day you get McDonald's All-American talent playing in the SWAC, point blank. Anybody that's seen this guy play where at his previous stop at Ole Miss, the dude was legit. There's one other name on this roster that really raised an eyebrow for me, and that was Juan Reyna. Anybody remembers Juan Reyna? He started his career at Alabama State, and there was a lot of, high hopes for him in terms of turning into that point guard, two guard, combo guard guy that could really stretch the floor and hit the three. That guy is a legit sniper from 3-point range. If he's being added into the mix here at Jackson, for a squad that has really been kind of hot and cold, shooting three ball consistently, it might be a really, really good, addition. I just know Ruffin, he's going to change the way how Jackson State plays the guard position. And I'm excited to see what Coach Williams does with them.
Yep, I am as well. And then we've got one last team to be able to take a look at, as Alabama A&M, I think, is going to be such an interesting team this year as well, because they do have to turn over a lot of the roster from a season ago, but I love the fact that they bring in Quincy McGriff. Quincy McGriff is a guy that's been around college basketball, was over at Duquesne last season, so I do think that there's going to be quite a bit of upside there. Lorenzo Downey is a guy that returns as well. He's someone that at 6'5" is able to do a nice job stretching the floor. And they bring in a guy that I think is a little bit under the radar as well. So Lou CA, that's a guy that I think is a little bit of a developmental project, but at 7 feet tall, if they're able to get him to fire on all cylinders, stay out of foul trouble, I think that there's some upside there. How do you take a look at an Alabama A&M team that clearly they were a bunch at last season? They had, I would say, a tale of two seasons, as I thought that they were one of the most improved teams in the SWAC towards the back half of the season.
I absolutely agree. And that's hard for me to say as an Alabama State product. So all rivalry aside, what head coach Otis Hughley has done there has been remarkable. He's taken, all the buzz that's been translated with the new facility that's there. If you've ever been to that facility on the campus, it's one of the best mid-major basketball facilities out there, point blank. I mean, I'm really excited looking at this roster. I know last year they did play in the postseason. If I'm not mistaken, they were in the CBI or the CIT, either one of those tournaments, and they made a pretty deep run. I think they lost to Norfolk State. Coach Hughley, kind of hung his hat on really tough defensive play, protecting the glass, really grinding out possessions. If you look at this roster from top to bottom is big. A multitude of people ranging from 6'6" to 7 feet. As you mentioned, Salio CA, transfers from Dakar, Senegal from UT Rio Grande. I think he's going to be a real difference maker in terms of being able to add to that defensive philosophy. But I also think he's really going to be effective on the other side of the ball as well. I think the big thing with Alabama A&M has always been perimeter play, the consistency of perimeter scoring, particularly from slots 1 through 3. If they can shore that up, I see these guys as a dark horse. I see these guys as a dark horse, not just for the regular season title, but I see them as a dark horse getting all the way to the NCAA tournament.
Yep, I'm right there with you with Alabama A&M. The way that they were able to ascend last season was tremendous. On the defensive side of things as well, they were very rock solid. And as you know, this is going to be a really exciting SWAC. I look at this conference, I think that there's going to be a ton of parity. And Herbert, you've ran through all 12 teams with me. You do an absolutely tremendous job. Be able to cover this conference, the MEAC, and so much more. And I mentioned it at the top. You've got about 17 different jobs. You do them all so well. So we'll give you the floor right here. Let the good people at home know it's all tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Oh, man, thank you. I don't know about the 17 different jobs, but yeah, man, first things first, for everybody that follows HBCU basketball, I do a podcast, HBCU Hoops Weekly. That's part of our HBCU Nightly Network family of podcasts. That will be returning in earnest for its second season in November. So stay tuned for that. There's also a website that goes along with that. That's kind of the end-all be-all for HBCU basketball news at the Division I, Division II, and NAIA level. That's HBCUHoopsWeekly.com. If you want to get news on recruiting, regular content on squads, teams, and other storylines associated with HBCU basketball, all of our conferences, doesn't matter whether it's the SWAC, the MEAC, the CIAA, the SIAC, you name it. We cover it. Check that out. And again, for everybody that has really followed HBCU basketball, man, it's a blast. I think between the SWAC and the MEAC Division I level, I'm not sure if, my guy Greg is going to be doing a MEAC preseason preview, but the MEAC
we already got you on for it, I believe.
Yeah. The MEAC is really going to be lights out. I'm really excited to see that conference, given the talent that's coming in there as well. For everybody that's, taking time out to follow our product, thank you. Really, support Greg Peterson, man. This dude's legit. He does his due diligence in terms of covering our little part of the fiefdom of college basketball, and we really appreciate it.
Herbert, I appreciate you as well, because this conference, it's a lot of fun. Maybe we're not going to be seeing them cut down the nets in the Final Four or anything like that, but there's so much passion when it comes to HBCU basketball. There's so many guys that they put their blood, sweat, and tears into just playing Division I college basketball. They're fulfilling their dream, and they fight for our bankrolls as well. So we're going to certainly give them coverage. And Herbert, he does a tremendous job. Take a look at these fine conferences, and every single time he joins me, lends such great insight. So big thanks, Herbert, for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, since this is the SWAC Conference Preview Edition, I'm going to give you guys my projected order finish for the SWAC. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. was an absolute pleasure to get Herbert Seward aboard. He does an incredible job taking a look at all things HBCU basketball over at HBCU Hoops Weekly and so much more. Fan-sided, I know that he's contributing over there, the HBCU Digital Network, and so much more. So, big thanks to Herbert for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector or finish for the SWAC, as per usual, because I'm doing a conference preview today. Any news and notes I missed from college basketball on Monday, those are going to be polished up on the podcast. All these conferences, they deserve to get their sparkle and shine all individually, so we will give this podcast exclusively to the SWAC, and anything that I miss, we'll get that all taken care of tomorrow. So, how about if we start with my projector or finish at dead last, and this should come as an absolute shocker as Mississippi Valley State finds themselves as dead last. They were last in the country in points scored on a per possession basis and 358th in points allowed on a per possession basis last year. Now, leader in assists, Donovan Sanders, 10.5 points, 2.8 assists, 2 steals per contest, which was actually 40th among Division I players, is going to be back, but he is the only returning player that had more than 1.1 points per game last season. Karan Walton made 15 starts, but he averaged less than a point and a rebound per game. Walter's state transfer, Jair Horton, was able to give his team 7 points and 5 rebounds per game at the non-Division I level, and they're going to be looking to him. They had a turnover on 23.4% of possessions last year. I wish I had much nicer things to say, but this is going to be dead last in terms of my projector to finish, and we'll just leave it there. At number 11, I'm going to be going with Arkansas Pine Bluff, as Pine Bluff just loses all of their great scorers from last season. Kyler Melton was able to bomb it from 3. Rashad Williams, along with Joe French, all these guys, 15-plus points per contest, and with Pine Bluff being in such transition, I do think that that's going to be rough for them. They do add quite a bit of size, but now they're going to be looking to a lot of, shall we say, unproven scorers. Jair McLeod was able to log about 5 points, 4.2 rebounds per game. Quentin Bolden, he was over at Charleston Southern last year. He was able to average about 7.5 points, 4.3 rebounds per game as a 6'6" combo player, but only played in 11 games last season. They were 21st in total possessions, which I think is going to slow down quite a bit. They were 13th in road three-point shooting percentage. Again, do you think that that's going to be tapered off a little bit, as Zach Reinhardt is the only returning player that shot above 20% from three-point range last year, as he averaged 2 points per game in 16 games, shooting 30.8% from three-point range. So that's an issue. Team was 350th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 356th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and 348th in rebound rate. I do think that this is going to be a rough year for Pine Bluff, so I do have them at number 11 in terms of my projector or finish. And number 10, I'm going to be going with Florida A&M. They had a losing record for the 17th straight season last year, though I do think that there is a little bit of an upside. Patrick Crary II comes in after he was able to be a rock-solid coach over at St. Thomas in the great state of Texas, and I do think that Jordan Chapman is going to be big for him, along with Roderick Cuffey III. Well, he was able to get you buzzed up after he was able to be at the program last season, and he was able to maintain a few players from a season ago. So I do think that that's big for Jordan Chapman. Do think that he's probably their biggest upside guy, while Coffey is someone who had 6'5", really didn't play a ton last year, but was able to deliver a little bit off the bench, while Chapman was able to be a 5.5 point, 4.5 rebound per game guy. Started out at the non-Division I level, shot about 33% from distance a season ago, so do think that there's going to be a bit of upside with him. Additionally, bringing in Shaquille O'Neal's son, is going to be able to help out the program, as well as Shakir O'Neal. He was only averaging about 2 points per game over at Texas Southern. He's going to be coming into the program. You've got Sterling Young, who averaged about 2.5 points per contest over at Charlotte in a small sample size a season ago. He's going to be coming in. You do want to see this team improve at the free throw line. They shot 64.9% at the charity stripe, but Morel Schramm, he averaged about 4.2 points per game on 46% three-point shooting last season. So I do think that there's a little bit of upside here with Florida A&M. Would like to see them get a few more splashy pieces in the portal, though, as the guys that they have returning, they were more ancillary pieces. So do have Florida A&M at number 10 in terms of my projector or finish. Now is when the decisions start to really get tough. At number 9, I'm going with Prairie View, and Prairie View has a rich tradition of being good in this conference, and the team is very much one that is looking to go down low and they're looking to generate steals. They only had 20.5% of their points come from made three-point shots last season, 7th lowest percentage in all of college basketball. They bring in Braylon Bush, who I really liked at Northwestern State. 10.5 points, 3 assists per contest. This for an offense that was 334th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 325th in three-point shooting percentage. Tenaj Petaway, who was over at New Mexico State last season. I believe that he began his career over at Stony Brook. 5 points per contest. He should be able to help. And Jordan Tillman is someone that I really liked when he was over at Florida A&M as a starter in his 2 seasons there. 10.5 points, 2.5 assists per contest. He was over at Southern Indiana last year. Didn't get as much run. Micah Clark is someone that comes in from North Alabama after he was very limited there. I like Marcel Bryant as a little bit of an upside guy as well. 3.5 points per contest over at Homa last season. And Chris Felix and Orlando Horton are the team's top 2 scorers, averaging about 6.3 points per game combined between the two of them. So you've got a very new-look team, one that runs a very unique style and that they're always trying to generate turnovers. And I think that might be a little bit to their detriment, especially considering that they were tough on the glass last year. By tough, I mean it was a rough flooding for them, 356th in the country in terms of their rebound rate. So as a result, I've got Prairie View at number 9 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 8, I'm going to be going with Alcorn State. Alcorn State has found themselves towards the top of the SWAC each out of the last 3 years, but I do think that this is going to be rough with having to replace each out of the top 6 scorers from last season. Julian Lowell, he comes over from Arkansas State, 6'6", do-it-all sort of player with about 4.5 points per contest, shot 34.5% from three-point range. I like his upside. And we've also got Denaj Binet along with Michael Bajad, who averaged a combined 8.5 points, 7.3 rebounds per game as part-time starters last season. Therese Elliott was rated by JUCORecruiting.com as the number 52 junior college transfer after he was able to log about 9 points, 2 assists per contest after a very notable junior college at Northwest Florida State. So that's going to be a little bit of upside for the team, but there's just a lot of uncertainty. Jalik Gaines Wyatt was able to average about 5 points per contest off the bench. So I just look at this team. I'm wondering where a lot of the scoring is going to be coming from. Down low, they don't necessarily look to be overly stout as well. So do I make question marks with Alcorn State? I do believe that Coach Busey does an amazing job with Alcorn State, but do you think that this might be a little bit of a down one? I've got them number 8 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 7, I'm going with Bethune-Cookman. With Bethune-Cookman, they had a very unexpected transfer haul that was able to help them out, and they do return Reggie Ward, who was able to give the team 9.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and a steal per contest, and shot 41.5% from three-point range. But I have a question as to how all these moving parts are going to be able to work out, because these transfers, they were announced about a week or so ago, so they're not going to have a lot of time to really be able to gel. And Brayon Freeman, in my opinion, is the headliner in all of this. He was over at George Washington and Rhode Island and was able to log while he was over at Rhode Island during the 2022-23 season. 14 points, 3 assists per contest. Jesus Calolero, he was pedestrian while he was over at Missouri last season, but when he was over at Campbell 2 seasons ago, more like 9.5 points, 5.5 boards, 4 assists. He had 6'7", is able to be a little bit of a point forward. And then G&I Hunt, he's another facilitator. 4 assists, 10 points per contest. I don't necessarily see a ton of great three-point shooting. Antoine Jones, I think, could be able to develop into that. He was over at Central Florida, where a season or two ago was averaging about 4.5 points per game. And then Trey Thomas is something I do like as well. But do have my question marks as to where the three-point shooting is going to be coming outside of Ward. And again, this team, it adds quite a bit of talent via the portal. How is it all going to be coming together? That is my question mark, as Reggie Theus, he's good at being able to get in the talent, hasn't necessarily been the world's greatest at being able to coach it up. So with Bethune-Cookman, going to remain a little bit pessimistic, and I'm going to need to see it to believe it out of them. So as a result, I've got them at number 7 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 6, I'm going with Alabama A&M. Alabama A&M doesn't have the firepower on paper that a team like Bethune-Cookman does, but this team has actually been pretty rock solid defensively. They're going to need to up that three-point shooting game. They were 351st in the country at 28.7% from three-point range and 361st in percentage of points from made three-pointers. They got 18.4% of their points from three, so they were really looking down low, but I love the fact that they pick up Quincy McGriff. He was averaging 5.3 points on 34.5% three-point shooting over at Duquesne 2 seasons ago. We've got Darius Ford, who comes in from TCU. Did not really play a lot at TCU, but just being able to get someone like that, that's big. So Lucie, he's a 7-footer that comes in after he logged about 3.5 points per contest over at UT Rio Grande Valley a season ago. And then Agong Ayang, hopefully I said that correctly. He was over at NAIA Ottawa. He was averaging darn near a double-double. 9 points, 10 boards, 2 blocks per contest. This team is going to be rock solid defensively. The offensive side of things is a little bit questionable, but Lorenzo Downey, I think, can really be a nice go-to scorer. 6.5 points, 4 boards, shot 36% from 3-point range. So I do think that there's some upside here with Alabama A&M, as they were really able to have a nice second half of the season last year. So Alabama A&M, number 6 in terms of my projector or finish. A lot of people might think I have them a little bit too low here, but at number 5, I'm going with Southern. Southern has won at least 10 conference games in 12 out of the last 13 seasons, and you've got Tijani Diamasi, who's back after he logged about 9 points, 5.3 assists, 2 steals per contest, but you do have to replace someone like a Brandon Davis, who is able to be a nice double-figure scorer for the bunch. Derek Tazzino, I like what he's able to provide, 9 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, but this team was absolutely awful on the glass last season. They were 315th in terms of rebound rate. They were also 9th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, which is nice. And you've got DeLong Muon, who is able to give the team about 4 points, 3 boards, and a block per contest, but you do lose a lot of those ancillary pieces. They're looking to Cam Ambrose to be able to pick it up a little bit after he was glued to the bench over at Oral Roberts a few seasons ago. So I look at Southern, I think that they're a little bit of a top-heavy team, having to look a little bit too much to Diamasi, and I don't know who else is going to be able to pick it up for them. So as a result, I've got Southern at number 5 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 4, I'm going to be going with Alabama State. Alabama State returns about as many minutes as any team in the SWAC, but they also had the worst home field goal shooting percentage in all of college basketball at 34.5%, so that's a little bit of an issue, but they were also 47th in points allowed on a per possession basis. Rock solid defense. TJ Madlock, son of the coach in Tony Madlock, 16 points, 5 boards, 2.3 assists, 1.7 steals per contest. CJ Hines, about 10 points and a steal per contest, led the team with about 2.5 assists per game. And then I was talking about this with Herbert, 7'1" Obang Okan. Getting him back, 6.3 rebounds, a little bit over a block per contest is nice, and I like Sean Fulcher after he was able to give the team about 8.5 points per game. I do think that there's quite a bit of upside with Sean Fulcher coming in. He put up some relatively solid numbers at Buffalo. Now, Buffalo was not a good team last season, but that said, 8.5 points, 3 assists, that should be able to help out in terms of being able to dole out the ball. And Amar Knox, he's able to give you a little bit over a steal per game, and he was able to put up about 9 points, 1.6 steals per game in the final 9 games of the season. Being able to retain that much chemistry, I think it's big for an Alabama State team that is going to be one of the better defensive teams out in the SWAC. So, as a result, at number 4 in terms of my projector finish, going to be going with Alabama State. At number 3, I'm going with Jackson State. Jackson State, I think, has a ton of upside because we were talking about, in terms of, in my opinion, the most instrumental player in this conference, Deshaun Ruffin. He averaged 12.5 points, 3.5 assists, 2.3 steals per game as a freshman in the SEC during the 2021-22 season. Unfortunately, has been hurt the last 2 campaigns, but being able to have him at a school like Jackson State is massive. Kavion Hunt, he joins Ruffin in the backcourt, about 5.5 points, 1.4 steals per contest last season, and you're looking at Florida A&M transfer Shannon Grant at 6'10" to be able to elevate down low, 10.5 points, 4.3 rebounds per game. I like Jamie Mitchell and what he could be able to provide. He was able to give the team 6.6 points and right around about 3 boards per contest, but was limited to just 9 games last season. The team was 36th in the country in terms of their overall offensive rebound rate. They do lose a lot of those pieces, though, and if Jackson State had a little bit more depth, I'd probably be willing to put them in my top 2, but as a result of having a little bit of a lack of depth, I have to go with Jackson State at number 3 in terms of my projector or finish. At number 2, I'm going with Grambling. Grambling has been number 1 in SWAC play each of the last 2 seasons, and they bring back both their leaders in points and rebounds from a year ago. Contavian Dozier, 13 points and a steal per game last season. Antoine Burnett, 10 points, 6 boards, shot 36% from 3-point range. Bringing in Lewis Hutchinson from Charleston Southern, who was able to put up about 5 points per contest. That's going to be big. Mikael Stevenson off the bench was able to dole out the ball with about 2 assists, a steal, 4.8 points per contest. the team was 341st in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but at home, they were 24th in points allowed on a per possession basis. I think that this is a case where you just have to go with in the Grambling defense, we trust sort of model. They do lose a little bit from what they had down low a season ago, but we saw a season ago what they were able to do in that NCAA tournament game. I do think that Grambling, once again, going to be one of the better teams out in this SWAC, so as a result, I've got them number 2 in terms of my projector finish, but at number 1, I'm going with Texas Southern. Texas Southern has done a really nice job of being able to elevate this roster, as Jalen Jackson Posey 2 seasons ago over at Stone Cold Steve F. Austin was averaging just under 10 points per game, shooting 40+% from 3-point range. Absolutely love his upside. And then they bring in Alex Anderson. Alex Anderson was over at Incarnate Word last season, 11 points, 3 boards, 3 assists per game. Not necessarily a guy that's going to let it fly from 3-point range, but began his career at South Alabama where he was a part-time starter. Spent a little bit of time at Alabama State as well, so he's got some familiarity with the SWAC, but coupled with that, you're bringing back quite a few of these guys that were just so big for them in the low post. Zatarius Moultrie along with Kobe Granger are back after they combined for about 10 points, 5.5 boards, 1.3 steals per game. Jalen Weisinger was able to chip in there as well, about 6.5 points per contest as well, so I like those upside pieces. Grayson Carter, 4 boards, 7 points. He's got some nice size. And Kenny Hunter, who I believe began his career at Louisiana Tech, he was able to lead the team with 4.5 boards, a little bit over a block per contest, and I do think that after this team was 292nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they should be able to go northward with Dwayne Posey coming into this program as well. 7.5 points, 5 boards over at Alabama State 2 seasons ago, and last year at Northwestern State, closer to about 6.5 points, 4.3 boards. So I think that Texas State really does have all the goods to be able to win this conference, especially with so much returning from a season ago. Bryce Roberts, I think, has a little bit of upside in the backcourt. So at number 1 in my projector finish, going with Texas Southern, and that'll wrap things up for the SWAC Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Herbert Seward, who does such great work covering all things HBCU sports and HBCU college basketball over at the HBCU Digital Network and HBCU Hoops Weekly. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you've got a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'll be coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, all 366 days this year, so I'll be joining you once again tomorrow. Thank you.